There's good theatre in other countries. There is some theatre other countries.
Well, again, good afternoon. I think it's time to begin. We are, good, definitely. The topic today is, from Luke 19:42, if only you had known the things that would make for peace. Lessons from Jerusalem in a time of war, with the very Reverend Canon Sewell, Dean of St. George's College, Jerusalem. Welcome everyone to Virginia Theological Seminary Center for Anglican Communion Studies Lunchtime Forum. I'm Catherine Greben. I'm the director of the Center for Anglican Communion Studies here. For those of you who are new to the Center for Anglican Communion Studies, we exist to create spaces like this, where we can converse with leaders across the world about issues of church and society, sometimes very difficult issues, like the ones we're going to talk about today. Our time goes until 1:45 p.m. We'll hear from our speaker from about 1 to 1:30, and then or a little bit less maybe, and then have lots of time for questions. We know that not everyone can be present for these sessions, and that everybody's interested. So we're streaming and recording the presentation itself. It'll be on the CACS Facebook page as soon as we can get it up, so that others can join us today and so that others can access the recording later. We will stop recording for the question and answer part so that you can ask the candid questions and hear candid answers. And now it's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome our speaker formally, our esteemed colleague and a good friend of Virginia Theological Seminary, the very Reverend Canon Sewell. He's Dean of St. George's College in Jerusalem, where he leads an excellent team to host transformative pilgrimages, engaging the land, its history, and its people. Dean Sewell has become a profound witness during the recent brutal war in Gaza and the ongoing occupation of Palestine, using his platform to bring awareness to the lived realities of his neighbors in Gaza and the West Bank, the new Gaza. He began his religious education at the University of Birmingham, with his BA there in theology, before getting an MA in biblical studies from Haythorpe College in London. He was ordained priest on the Feast of St. Francis in 2003 after training for ministry in what is now St. Augustine's College. He's a fierce advocate for the needs of those across and beyond the Anglican Communion. For 3 years, he ran an interfaith project in East London, and prior to ordination, he worked with the Anglican Mission Agency, USPG, as a mission educator, with additional responsibilities for USPG's relationship with churches in Pakistan and Bangladesh. In addition to that, he's a residentiary canon at St. George's Cathedral, Jerusalem, an honorary canon of Southwark Cathedral in his home diocese in the Church of England. Thank you for being you, and thank you for being with us today, Dean Richard, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everybody. It's such a delight always to come to VTS. I feel I'm coming to a home away from home for me, and coming out on a number of times from Jerusalem. I can breathe a deep sigh of relief when I land here, because life in Jerusalem and throughout Palestine and Israel is so oppressive and difficult. You don't even realize that you're sort of holding your breath half the time, and then come here and breathe out and breathe in and start to relax, and then that's a gift. And I feel so grateful for the friendship between St. George's College, the Diocese of Jerusalem, and Virginia Theological Seminary. You embody your support for us in so many ways. Firstly, in caring relationships, but also in other ways, financial and institutional, and that counts for such a lot. And it makes real what the body of Christ is all about, what the Anglican Communion is about at its best. And we celebrate that together in our relationships and all the things that we can do together. I bring greetings from Archbishop Hassan, from the Diocese of Jerusalem and all the clergy and people there, they feel a part of you. They know they belong to a worldwide Anglican communion. They don't love everything about the worldwide Anglican communion, but they do know they belong to something bigger than themselves. And they need to, because we are small. We're less than 1% of the whole population in all parts of the Holy Land, including Jordan. So we're extremely vulnerable. And we need that sense of belonging to a wider body, and I'll reflect a little bit on how that's worked out in the last couple of years. But all is not lost. We've taken blows, and there are massive disappointments, but we're still in it together. And especially I know that I'm amongst friends here, and I will take back with me to our people there what I've experienced here, which is pretty remarkable. So I thought I would reflect on Jesus' well-known statement, if only you had known the things that would make for peace, lessons from Jerusalem in a time of war. Because I thought I was coming out to run the pilgrimage centre of the Anglican community. It turns out that for 2 years in COVID and for 2 years in running during Israel's war on Gaza, nobody has either been able to come or wanted to come because of the safety issues, and so I've had to find other things to do, and I'm not very good at sitting around doing nothing, so I've made a nuisance of myself. What is it, your great African-American freedom worker, John Lewis? Is it John Lewis? Make sure you get in. I think this was actually Nancy that told me, because I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and she said that he ordered people or encouraged people to get into good trouble. I'm pushing the line of good because, when what we define as good, others define as bad, and that's how it is at the moment. The values are being turned upside down, and things that there used to be agreement are good things. Now those things are under a lot of pressure, and that's the same, I think, for you here as it happens, but more so for us. So I've got some things I want to read. I've got some bullet points I will put out and maybe expand on, and I'll probably go off-piste, and then we'll have lots of time for questions. Nothing can prepare you for a time of war, although living in Jerusalem from 2018 had given me some inkling about what we eventually have been facing for the last 2 years. The fourth Gaza war, or the Unity Intifada of May 2021, came very close to our door, and in some ways it felt more directly threatening to us than what we've been through for the last 2 wars. Last 2 years. In May 2021, the missiles were coming out of Gaza. It was sparked off by incursions into the Al-Aqsa compound, the ways in which the Israeli forces were restricting the rights of Muslims to attend Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan, and even to restrict where they could congregate and be together. And it was such an infringement on the rights of Palestinians in the holy city of Jerusalem that it provoked a violent upsurge from Gaza, and missiles actually came in a little bit to parts of Jerusalem, not near us. But it sparked off also riots in the streets, and they were right outside the gates of the college. And there were running battles going with police, mounted police, water cannon, driving up and down outside, spraying skunk water, this extraordinary thing that the Israeli army have invented. So you're not only sprayed with water from the water cannon, but the water cannon smells like a skunk. And once it's on your clothes, you cannot clean it, you just burn your clothes. And if it gets on your in your car or in your shop, you've got months and months of a unholy stench. And that was happening for about 10, 12 days outside us. we were never under any threat. The Palestinians who were attacking the Israeli forces roundabout know that we belong to them because we are a Palestinian institution, Palestinian church. So they were attacking the municipal court opposite and a little bit to the Israeli Department of Justice, which is next door to us, but we were fine. Nevertheless, it was horrible, and people were shot, injured, and there was one death nearby to us. So that was 2021, and I, brought it home to me that I was in the midst of a place that could be significant trouble. But although we have lived through this war, and it has been like nothing I could ever have imagined, these past 2 years, no building around us or anywhere near us was hit by a missile. I've not at any stage had a gun pointed in my face. However, we definitely feel like we have been living through a war. We have had more missile alerts and air raid sirens than I can count, right in our neighbourhood. We've made our speedy way to the bunker in the basement of the college on numerous occasions. We have lived with the news of the war, which has at its heart a genocide, every single day. I'm sure it is possible that somebody could, if they were really determined, sort of bury their heads and sort of escape from the news of it all, but that has not been possible for us. Being in it, I needed to know what was happening in detail day after day. So we wake up to the news of what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, and we live with it through the day, and it's probably the last thing we think about before we go to sleep. The war has been the air that we breathe for 2 years, and we've not even been in the center of it. No one has suffered through these 2 years like the people of Gaza. And so whenever I'm asked about how I'm doing, people are concerned, family and friends, how are you doing? And, I try and be honest and not just dismiss it, but very quickly I divert to the people of Gaza. There was a even asking the question, how are you, became very difficult. A bit like when somebody is bereaved, and if you sort of see them and you forget for a moment that they're in grief and you go, how are you? And they'll sort of go, okay. And you think, I asked the wrong question. You don't do that to certainly in British culture, you learn not to do that. You ask it in a different way so that you sort of anticipate that their answer is they're broken and they're hurting and you can't just be okay. And that was the way it was, even amongst us in the close. Good morning, how are you? And you sort of go, yeah, I'm okay today. But we developed this thing where actually sometimes somebody would say, how are you? You'd think, Gaza. How am I? Gaza. And that's what we're living with, an absolute broken heart. And your day-to-day being was not okay because of the genocide that was running amok, that we could see happening and was allowed to happen without restraint. And I'm not going to dismiss the suffering of Israeli Jews, those directly affected by the actions of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. On October the 7th, the hostages held in Gaza and their families suffered horribly. People in the north of Israel and in Tel Aviv whose homes were hit were affected very badly. There's no question. But Gaza is something different. There it has been literal hell on earth. The war didn't start in October 23. October the 7th didn't come out of nowhere. War had been brewing for 75 years. In fact, you could say that Israel and Palestine have been at war all that time, but it's been interspersed with ceasefires. The spikes have been 1948, of course, the Nakba, 67, 73, 86 to 89, 2000 to 2003, 2014, 2021, and finally 2023. And those are only the major conflagrations, lots of other lesser ones. So Christians and everyone else didn't suddenly have to learn about living through war in 2023. They had been learning strategies all along, passed down from generation to generation. But 2023 to 25, and still going, has been on another level to what has been before. I call it a war, but understand when I say that it's shorthand for genocide in Gaza, and ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, and a tightening tourniquet for all Palestinians in Palestine, and in Israel too. Palestinians in Israel have also suffered in all sorts of ways. That's a whole other question, but every Palestinian in the land has been profoundly impacted, but none more so than in Gaza. And it's not only the Palestinians who suffer. Both sides have been living in fear, and fear drives terrible actions and creates a blindness that makes it very difficult to see anything clearly except anger and violence. Early on in the war, on October the 17th to be precise, many Christians in Jerusalem, including many of the church leaders, gathered in St. George's Cathedral to pray for peace. There were readings, hymns, heartfelt words of reflection on the agony of war, and there were prayers for peace. Shortly after everyone had left the church, news started coming through that our Al-Ahli hospital had been hit by a missile, causing the deaths of hundreds of children, women and men who had been sheltering in the car park of our hospital. So much for the prayers for peace. You know, it actually made people afraid to hold prayers for peace because of the feeling that came straight after the other great gathering for peace. It made us afraid to pray for peace. It has been a challenge of dramatic proportions to hold on to faith, hope and love. So a few thoughts about the reactions that I have had, and I think others have had, in these times of a brutal, terrible, decimating war. I've had to think how to preach and pray honestly when death and destruction is all around you. You just cannot preach in the same way when you know as you speak, 50 miles away, innocent people are being bombed to death and starved to death and denied water. It makes you think about every word that you preach. Is this true? And I would often think when I'm preaching, could I preach this sermon in Gaza? If I was invited, and it couldn't happen, but if I was preaching in the Holy Family Church, in the compound of the Roman Catholic community in Gaza City, near to our hospital, could I preach this sermon with honesty and then not, reject it because it is inauthentic? It's a very sharpening tool that makes you think carefully about every word you say to other people. Platitudes and niceties and the usual theological patterns that we fall into won't do when there is a genocide going on next door. How to maintain any sense of a positive outlook when every day seemed as if it were worse than the day before. We've got so many ways of dealing with difficult times which are sort of a bit trite. Things can only get better. Things were always getting worse. We just were anticipating every day what horror we were going to be reading about or hearing about, and people that we know directly impacted, or their families, people that we have as work colleagues, my staff, people close to us, people working in the hotel or the restaurants nearby, have family in Gaza. And so you know they are carrying on with this terrible grief with them, and everybody's trying to get on with life but not forget that this is the reality. And how not just to become cynical and so gloomy. Actually, we're challenged often by our Palestinian friends, and their resilience is legendary. It's something they say of themselves, and it's something that others say of them. The word for resilience in Arabic is quite widely known. I expect half of you know it, sumud. And it means resilience and determination in the face of so much that is harmful. But even that can be used as another sort of oppressive tool to Palestinians, because they've got to be resilient, because that's the Palestinian way. And they don't have to be. And even my most positive Palestinian friends have been tested to the point of breaking with their sense that they are going to just face it, because they faced it before. They've been through these things before. But this went on and on and on, so it tested us all. How not to let anger govern your mood and words all the time. I went out to serve in Jerusalem with a profound desire to be part of a bridge building between Jews and Muslims and Christians. I had probably amongst some of my friends slightly more positive attitude about Israel and what they could be, and at their heart wanted to be. I was very opposed to some of my friends who were using sort of 1930s, 40s language from Germany in relation to Israel, and I was saying, I think that's really, really unhelpful. We can criticize in other ways without, using all those terms that we apply to Nazi Germany. And yet, through all of my experiences over 7 years, I've come to see Israel as a project differently. Not all by any means, but Israelis, in some senses, as a whole, as a nation, differently to how I was, how I saw them before. But I don't want to let hatred and anger govern how I see people. We're as Christians, we're taught to do differently, live differently, say differently, but I could not have that same intention. Relationships that I had with Jewish people in Israel were strained to breaking point and sometimes broke. I could not bear to see people justifying actions in Gaza that I felt were horrific, and so easier sometimes just to close it down. And I tried on a few occasions to meet with people from across the divide, and sometimes it went better than others. We never ended up, full on row or anything, but you had to so tiptoe around each other. And I have come to feel so alienated from Israel as a nation. The college is in occupied East Jerusalem, so our context is Palestinian. The language of all the people around us in our neighborhood is Arabic. Our culture is Arabic, but very nearby, you step over the light railway line and you are into ultra-Orthodox territory. Actually, first language is Yiddish, second language is Hebrew, different world. It's not my world. And even in the modern West Jerusalem, which is not so very far away, the pedestrian precincts area of Jaffa Street and all around there, I don't feel at ease. I don't want to feel at ease in a way, but I don't want bitterness and hatred to rule my heart. This is what living through war becomes like. How to sustain a sense of appreciation of the goodness and mercy of God and of the beauty of creation. It affects everything that you see and everybody that you see. War infiltrates your thinking and your outlook in so many ways, and You have to plumb the depths of your Christian spirituality to not to be infected and to become embittered and angry. And lots of my friends I have found, not lots, maybe some, I feel have gone a bit further down that line than I have, but I can see myself going there if I'm not very, very careful. It's almost become a cliche that the first casualty of war is truth, but my goodness, the weight of that assessment really came home to me in these times. Everything that I read, I scrutinized for the subtext, what was really being said, how truthful was it, and you'd read one report there and another report there, and these are describing the same events, and you could not really believe it. The lens through which you see war, it determines everything about how you describe those events, and this creates a deeper and deeper divide with a massive ravine of misunderstanding between both sides. What lessons have I learnt? And I think these things apply in some ways to all of us in different ways, particularly living through really intense times of ideological and political division that are really your reality too. And I'm sure some of you feel that very intensely, others maybe intensely at times and less so at others. But this is not unique to me and unique to Israel-Palestine at all. And I think there are lessons for all of us. But I felt I had to learn early on that I had to learn to maintain a sense of internal equilibrium. That I could just feel my body tightening with grief and anger and sadness, profound sadness, like it was a personal grieving. Although nobody I knew personally has died as far as I recall, but those same signs of grief that we recognize. And so you probably know the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And I've used that many, many times through my Christian life. And you use it, the way that I use it is with breathing. So you breathe out a phrase, you breathe in a phrase, you breathe out a phrase, and you breathe in. It's a sort of form of meditation with the simple Jesus prayer. And I adapted it for myself so that I would say, Lord Jesus Christ, Prince of Peace, grant us your peace, that we may give peace. So you breathe in, Lord Jesus Christ. Breathe out, Prince of Peace. Breathe in, grant us your peace. Breathe out, that we may give peace. And just saying that like a mantra over and over again, sitting in our chapel. We have Eucharist every morning at 8 o'clock. Yes, Stella, 8 o'clock now, not 7 o'clock, because there are no pilgrims to get us up. Virtually mid-morning. And I would sit there before the Eucharist started, if I wasn't presiding, and just say that, for the 5 minutes before, to try to sort of, as it were, expunge the tension and the grief and the anger at everything that was going on. And it helped, really helped. It's become one of my sort of coping mechanisms. Prayer and meditation and scripture and imbibing the grace and goodness of God when your whole day depends upon it. It's so different. You have to prevent yourself from descending into destructive hatred. It's really easy to think, I loathe and detest those people that are promoting the total destruction of a people and their culture, their schools, their hospitals, their places of worship, their infrastructure, their universities. Virtually everything has gone. The children, something like 40% of the entire population of Gaza are under 16 years of age. And not a single one of them has had a day of school, more or less, for 2 years. Their education has been destroyed, and it will take so much to get back on track, apart from the deep trauma of the grief. You know, maybe they're the only surviving member of their family, 70 killed in one missile. This story has been repeated over and over and over and over again. How do children and anybody recover from all of that? And you know, I blame people for that. I blame Netanyahu and his wicked government. I blame the international leaders who have enabled, colluded with, and armed those genocidal intentions and justified it in the most extraordinary ways. I'm furious. But you don't want that to be your internal narrative all the time. It's so destructive of yourself. So trying to learn not to let destructive hatred determine everything. Thank God for Jesus Christ. You have to keep your eyes on the ultimate goal of peace, justice and reconciliation. How to live those goals daily. You know, I don't want to just win, whatever that means. I don't just want Israel to be defeated and their terrible, dark ways defeated, because that doesn't create anything better. We've got to have a goal of peace with justice. Justice leading to peace that offers a prospect, ultimately, somehow, somewhere, of reconciliation. That's what we have to be about, not simple, whatever winning looks like. I couldn't even describe what winning looks like in this situation. I learnt that you cannot be neutral, just trying to, both sides, everything. And of course, empathy for everybody who's grieving, everybody who's impacted. We can do that. As Christians, we should do that. But you can't be neutral about war crimes. You can't be neutral about crimes against humanity. You can't be neutral about genocide. You have to work out what you think and to describe it. Fear and anger must not determine all your words and actions. The ways of violence and hatred can only be overcome by alliances of co-resistance. So I've tried, in my role as Dean of the College, to work on those other people with whom I can cooperate to resist these terrible, dark times. And I've found some allies in the extraordinary Israeli NGOs who are working against the occupation and working against a government that is fascistic in tendency. Members of the government will openly describe themselves as fascists because they are about the victory of Jews over everybody else. They're about the evacuation of Palestinians because they don't belong. They don't even really exist, but insofar as such a thing as a Palestinian exists, they don't belong anywhere in the land, from the river to the sea. It's the definition of fascism. There are many other elements of it, but that's a key one. This land is for us and not for others, even though they predated the influx of Jewish people from the 20th century onwards. So co-resistance, and I just won't work with people that will not work against the occupation. If they don't see the occupation of Palestinians as something unacceptable, I cannot partner with them. That's been a decision I've had to take. But then committing to working with rabbis for human rights, extraordinary people, doing incredible things, putting themselves on the line, being arrested by Israeli forces, being absolutely lambasted and sometimes disowned by their own family for taking the positions that they have done. But they don't care. Their faith directs them to do differently. We do not help situations one iota by minimizing suffering and sentimentalizing faith. While there are perpetrators and architects of hatred and division, there are many others who are being manipulated, and we have to keep our eyes and focus on the humanity of those on the other side, to see that people are not simply the label they live underneath, but even the oppressor needs to be liberated, and some of them have just lost sight of how that can happen. There will be no good news for anyone in the land, which in some senses is not good news for, I said everyone, but actually then it's almost everyone. There are going to be some losers if the good prevails, because there are some people so invested in the maximization of evil that they will be losers. But I think the vast majority will benefit from a solution that arises. If only you had known the things that would make for peace, says Jesus. We know everything that makes for war. There are books and books and books and books and books, and there are industries set up all about making war, and yet we don't know really what makes for peace, and we don't invest in it, we don't live for it, we sideline it, and we should spend so much more time, energy, effort working out how to live in peace. Jesus knows that his message of love of God and love for humanity, which takes precedence over clan, tribe, culture, and religious restrictions, has met a firm rejection from the religious authorities. The occupying Roman forces were threatened by Jesus' unwillingness to be cowed into conformity. The things that make for peace are captured in all Christ's teaching and are sharply focused in the Beatitudes. I've started saying that perhaps we should remove the creed from our liturgy and replace it with the Beatitudes. Every service, say the Beatitudes so that they become part of us and they direct what we understand we should think and be and do, primarily do. The road to peace runs directly and unavoidably through justice for all. There is no bypass and there is no shortcut. This simple teaching was too challenging for the scribes and the Pharisees, for the Sanhedrin and the chief priest. The Roman authorities delivered the fatal blow which Jesus' teaching in the spirit of the prophets required. The price that Jesus paid was death, but the reward for the world following Christ's resurrection was salvation through faith. The lessons remain clear for us too. Christ's teaching is as true now as it was then. There is a way to achieve the goal of peace which seeks to bypass. There is no way to achieve the goal of peace which seeks to bypass justice. Sadly and tragically, modern-day Israel has failed to realize that. Pursuing peace, security and prosperity for the Jewish inhabitants of Israel at the expense of the Palestinians, who in the 20th century were the indigenous people of the land. Realizing that their objectives were eluding them, they have attempted ever harsher treatment and policies for Palestinians, squeezing the very life out of them. It has reached its ultimate expression in the total decimation of Gaza. This is not and never can be what makes for peace, and yet it was the stated military and political aim of Israel after October the 7th, to destroy and defeat Hamas once and for all, so that Israel and the Jews of Israel could be safe and secure inside their borders. And it has spectacularly failed, as it was always going to. You do not, whatever you think about your enemy, if you think you have to destroy their man, woman and child, you become the problem. And you're solving nothing, and you are simply adding to the bonfire of hatred and destruction. And that is what we have seen, which isn't in any way to justify Hamas or all the others on the Palestinian side. But I think it's always worth remembering that Israel has its own army, navy, air force. They are permitted under international law to defend themselves and to defend their borders. Palestinians have no army, navy or air force when they are under attack, military attack, backed by the most powerful nation in the world. They have no means of self-defense that they are permitted. So is it any surprise that they will take up arms in paramilitary forces, and it will feed hateful ideologies bolstered by religious faith? If you do not give a people the chance to defend themselves under international law, they will find a way to do it if they feel themselves under life-threatening attack. It's a human instinct. It's bound to happen. So simply saying Palestinian militants are terrorists and they should be totally. So Hamas now have to disarm. Why wouldn't they agree to disarm? They've been defeated. So they should just hand over their weapons. It's a done deal. They have been under attack by Israel for the entirety of the time of the State of Israel. And they then become disarmed in the face of oppressive military power with no means to protect themselves. And that's exactly what's happening in the West Bank, with armed settlers marauding around the place, attacking unarmed Palestinian villages, and the Israeli army and police could not care less. And the Palestinians are totally defenseless. Not surprising that others are finding ways to bring weapons into Palestine and are setting up cells to defend their people. I'm not going to justify terrorism. I don't justify violence and killing and warfare. But if we don't understand the bind that they have been put in, then we're missing something absolutely crucial. So I hadn't quite anticipated finishing there, and I've already gone on too long, and I want to hear your questions, but I think you get my drift.